And part 2. Apologies for the abrupt ending in the last episode. I actually had no intention of stopping where I did, but unfortunately, technical issues with my recording platform forced me to cut it short. And then I wanted to release part 2 today on Memorial Day because this episode is dedicated to Ashley Henning, an honorable service member who devoted herself to her country and should have been celebrating her 20-year this year with the military in 2025 after 20 years of service. But as I discussed in part 1, she never got the chance to reach that milestone. Many of you may know that I live in San Diego, California, and Ashley's laid to rest here at Miramar National Cemetery, which is a final resting place for service members. She was born here, and in honor of her life and sacrifice, I'm going to be headed down to visit her grave today with some flowers to express gratitude to not only Ashley, but to all the veterans who have served this country. Now, before we get into the trial of Jordan Henning, I want to share part of a letter from Holly, Ashley's best friend. This trial was filled with misinformation. Jordan, in his defense, had absolutely no regard for the truth. I've uncovered multiple insiders who attest to Jordan's long history of deception. So before we hear all the falsehoods, let's be clear. Jordan Henning is a habitual liar, and his defense was nothing short of manipulative. But before we confront those lies, let's take a moment to remember who Ashley truly was. Holly wrote, I met Ashley in 2006, back when we were 19 years old and we both got stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. She was everyone's friend. You couldn't, and most likely still can't, find a person who disliked her, aside from that monster of a husband. She had no enemies and was loved by everyone. As a soldier, she was always ready and willing to help everyone out. If you didn't have a car but needed to go off base for something, she would gladly take you. If you needed help with something at work, she was right there to help you or at least get someone else that could help figure out if she didn't know how. She showed up to work whether she was tired, ill, or injured. Ashley was dedicated and reliable. As a friend, she was all that plus so much more. She was always there for her friends and most of the time there to help them even if they didn't ask for it. If she knew you were down and out, she'd show up with a pizza and play cards or watch movies all night. If you wanted to celebrate a special event, she was right by your side being the biggest hype person she could to help you enjoy the occasion. Ashley stayed level-headed and rational in every situation. She even made our deployment fun because she just never seemed to indulge in negativity. She had the most boisterous laugh. You could be on the other side of a building and hear that energetic, happy laugh she had. There was no way you were having a bad time when in her presence. And that's from Holly Victorino. Now, I've heard from multiple people across my social media platforms who knew Ashley personally, and I've combed through every corner of the internet. And in all of my searching, I haven't found a single person who doesn't share the same sentiment as Holly. Now, let's dive into the disgrace that was Jordan Henning's trial. This 2-week trial began in March of 2025. Now, I'm not going to cover every witness, but I want to give a broad overview of the crucial testimonies and share what I believe to be a lackluster performance by the prosecution team, perhaps an unconscious bias or just downright incompetence. Whatever way you slice it, they fell short on this one. And to steal a quote from Holly, she said they were about as effective as a white crayon. Now we see Jordan come in, and for his part, he looks drastically different physically than the man seen in pictures prior to the trial. He's much smaller. His muscles gone. His military high and tight is now somewhat unkempt. He just looks pitiful to me. And during the proceedings, we would learn why his appearance had changed so dramatically. So stand by for that. Now, since Jordan's crimes did not occur on a military base, the Commonwealth of Kentucky prosecuted his case, not the military. The prosecution was led by an attorney named Eric Carr. The Commonwealth sought a first-degree murder conviction against Jordan. Jordan's defense employed an intriguing tactic, and a shameless one at that. They admitted that Jordan did indeed kill Ashley, as the evidence was irrefutable and captured on camera for the judge and jury and the whole world to see. However, the defense argued that Jordan had a valid reason for this appalling act. They claimed that Jordan was a battered husband suffering from extreme emotional disturbance, or EED. The defense asked the jury to acquit Jordan of murder and instead find him guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter. Now, in Kentucky, a first-degree manslaughter charge can apply when a person intends to cause serious physical injury and causes death, or when a person intends to cause death but does so under the influence of EED. The defensive team also pushed the narrative that on the night of the murder, Jordan just snapped. The years of abuse and his extreme emotional disturbance caused him to just snap, although we'd see them waffle around on their actual defense. They make several claims. They're just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if anything will stick. Opening statements for the Commonwealth would be brief. Eric Carr described the events that occurred on the home surveillance footage. He would tell the jury that they would see Ashley's murder clear as day. He told the jury that the video would be a challenging video to watch, but that it was necessary in this case to prove that Ashley was murdered in cold blood. Eric would say that the murder might not have been premeditated, but it was animalistic. Jordan's defense attorney, Robert Eggert, delivered a lengthy opening statement. He went on and on and on, and he may have even dozed off at some point, I'm not sure. But he began by extolling Jordan's virtues as an outstanding soldier, using his military career to explain how he just broke. Eggert portrayed Jordan as a seasoned combat soldier who had endured the strenuous challenges of warfare and its aftermath. And this narrative is, in actuality, a lie, which infuriates me, because to paint Jordan as a combat service member who'd been through war and was dealing with the trauma and residue of war couldn't be further from the truth. And a quick review of Jordan's military records would reveal that he never deployed into combat. He made a trip to Kuwait, which is not a war zone. It is, in fact, a relatively safe place. Eggert also referred to the training Jordan went through at the National Training Center, or NTC, as a combat school, and said it was as if Jordan was in combat whenever he was sent to NTC for training. He acted as if it had the same repercussions of being in actual combat. Now, according to my friends in the military who have experienced both combat zones and the NTC, this comparison is not accurate. NTC, they say, is more akin to like a corporate company's recurrent training. And yeah, it's super shitty and nobody wants to go. But the primary challenge is that it's just hot as hell. You are hot and out in the desert. But it's not combat. It's just miserable, shitty, hot training. There's no live fire exercises or mortar attacks. It's strictly job-specific training. In military terms, Jordan was an 88M, which translates essentially to a truck driver in civilian terms. Now, if you're picturing a service member in a Humvee navigating through a dangerous terrain and in a combat zone facing numerous enemy threats, dodging IEDs and roadside bombs, you'd be mistaken. Jordan was in reality a chauffeur. He drove his superiors to and from the Louisville airport as needed. The defense claimed that during the war, Jordan drove a truck to the border and back. And while Jordan definitely seems like the type of dude that would intentionally drive to the western border of Kuwait just to dip his toe in Iraq and try to collect a combat patch so he could take it home and show everyone he knows, he never even got to do that. His lawyer claimed that Jordan was dodging small arms fire and mortars, which is a blatant lie. Also doesn't make sense if you're familiar with a war zone. Small arms aren't firing at trucks. But anyways, Jordan went to Kuwait, and Kuwait, as I mentioned, is not listed as a combat zone. It's a green zone, meaning there's an agreement between the U.S. and that area to avoid conflict. There's nothing hazardous in Kuwait for an American truck driver. Eggert said numerous times that Jordan repeatedly was in danger and put his life on the line for the American people. Now, I appreciate everyone who serves, and they're all important. But I just want to make sure that people understand driving a truck in Kuwait and then from Fort Knox to the airport and back with high-ranking commanders is not the same as combat. And this false narrative could have been easily dispelled by the prosecution, and it's problematic that it wasn't. Did they review Jordan's military records and see that the box indicating combat time and place was completely empty and they didn't care to bring that to the jury's attention? Or did they not bother to confirm his military service? Because along with all of Jordan's other crimes, he was committing stolen valor, and his defense team was perpetuating that. Now, stolen valor, if you don't know, is the act of falsely claiming military service or falsely claiming rank or combat or honors for personal gain. And now I've known several combat veterans, some really amazing people, few not so good ones, but they all have one thing in common. They're all very humble about their combat, and most don't want to talk about it, let alone receive glory for it. That's my experience. I'm sure there are exceptions to every rule, but I feel like the combat veterans that I've known and met and have been exposed to are all incredibly humble, and they don't openly discuss their combat time. But Jordan, who wasn't a combat veteran, pretended to be one to craft a false image of a wounded warrior. He painted himself as broken by war. But that deception wasn't the worst of it. His defense took things further, making an utterly false accusation against Ashley. As if her brutal murder and robbing her children of their mother wasn't evil enough, Jordan's team had the audacity to claim that Jordan was the true victim and that Ashley was the abuser. Eggert would make false allegations, and there's one very specific allegation that I will refer back to when we uncover Jordan's double life. But Eggert kept talking about how Ashley would grab Jordan by his testicles. And I'm going to give you guys a quick mashup here in a second of Eggert bringing this up repeatedly and also Jordan. So I'm going to loop back to why this is so important. But just listen here to how they talk about Ashley grabbing Jordan's testicles.
They play soccer and so forth. My client brings out the slip and slide. There's hot dogs, there's hamburgers, and so forth. Apparently having a good time, but like many things, the truth is hidden. At some point outside, he literally just touches or tries to touch Ashley's cheek, and the response is a squeeze to the genitals, the point where it's painful. My client begins to decompensate.
She got mad and she would grab me right in the manhood.
Lies. And it should be noted that this outrageous distortion of reality has been passionately refuted by numerous people who knew both Jordan and Ashley. And we hear in the opening statement countless lies from the defense. We hear allegations that while Jordan was in Kuwait, the mother of his two daughters wrote him a Dear John letter and ended things, and that's when he moved on to Ashley. Based on what I know about Jordan, I seriously doubt this. We've also heard that Jordan took custody of his young daughter, supposedly due to his ex's struggles with addiction. But did the prosecution thoroughly investigate this claim? Eggert painted her as a deadbeat mom who abandoned her child, yet her family tells a drastically different story. They say Jordan stormed in one day, took the daughter, alienated her from her mother, and refused to return her, spinning lies to justify his actions. It was an absolute nightmare for the woman and her family, and frankly, I believe them. Time and time again, we see abusers gain custody by making false accusations against the protective parent. And I'm deeply disappointed that Jordan's ex wasn't called by the prosecution to testify because her voice could have revealed so much truth. Now, as we move into the trial, the prosecution brought forth witnesses from Ashley's birthday party on the night of the murder. Family friend Brandon Savat recounted watching tensions escalate toward the end of the party, describing a moment when Jordan aggressively grabbed Ashley by the back of the neck, and it sounded like he was pushing her head down, like in an attempt to control her or punish her, even with partygoers still present. Brandon noted that Ashley tried to duck her head away to kind of get out of his hold, or she tried to kind of shrug him off, and then she just shrugged and said, "I'm calling it a night." Now, Brandon would be one of multiple witnesses who would recount Jordan's aggressive grab at Ashley's neck. Now, in just a few minutes, I'm going to play a part of Jordan's testimony, and he has a very distorted version of what happened. He actually talks about how his love language was physical touch, and he wanted to caress Ashley, and she aggressively pushed him off. Brandon's testimony would also reveal that he often heard Jordan complaining about Ashley not having sex with him enough, portraying himself as the victim of sexual deprivation, a narrative we'd hear time and time again from those around Jordan. Now, there's a few things I want you to remember that I'm going to come back to, and this is one thing I want you to remember, because as we'll uncover later, like many things Jordan would claim, This couldn't be more untrue. And the fact that he's going to claim he's not having sex is unhinged. But Ashley, for her part, confided in friends that Jordan was cruel to her. His kindness was nothing more than a transaction, a means to an end. Once he got sex, the mask slipped and he reverted to being a jerk. Another key witness that takes the stand is Ashley's friend Jamie, who, by her own account, was also friendly with Jordan. And truly, may we all have a Jamie in our lives. I mean, she's a fireball of fierce loyalty. She stands unwavering in her support for Ashley. And though she was friends with both of the Hennings, she made her stance clear that justice must prevail and the truth about Jordan as the abuser has to be exposed. And the tension was palpable as she clashed with Jordan's lawyer, but she refused to back down. She even is referred to as a hostile witness by the defense. She recounts a discussion she had with Jordan shortly before he murdered Ashley, where he was being really aggressive with her, and she set his ass straight, which leads to a very interesting and incriminating comment from Jordan. So let me play that for you now.
There was a boundary very set early on with me and Jordan from that night forward, from that conversation to where when he put his hands on my face and I pushed him off of me and I said, Jordan, don't do that. Because I even said, there's just certain lines with me you do not cross. I said, my lines are, you do not F with my husband and you do not F with my kids. And he laughed and he goes, yeah. I said, that to me, you mess with my husband and you mess with my kids, I said, I will gladly rock a jumpsuit and smile in my mugshot if you cross those lines with me. I said, you can come in my house, you can steal my stuff, you can do anything, but don't cross those lines with me. Don't mess with my family. That is important to me. And Jordan laughed and he said, yeah, he goes, I feel similar. He goes, but the difference between me and you is he goes, being military, he goes, I can claim PTSD, and because I take testosterone injections, he goes, I can say I had a rage moment and claim insanity. And I was like, yeah, you actually do have a leg up on me if something ever crazy did happen.
Acts of violence between them.
That evening, as we were in the outside before we left, and this is pretty much what shut it down to where we were like, okay, we're done, we're going home. As I said, Jordan was over there. He was like in everybody's face talking about this. He took a step beside Ashley, and he took his hand was like this, and he grabbed her behind the back of her neck like this. And she did like this, like she kind of like brushed him off like that. And she said, okay, guys, I'm going to bed. But that's how Ashley was. Anytime Jordan would even say anything that was aggressive or mean, she'd walk away. She never engaged.
So Jamie's testimony is where we learn that Jordan was taking testosterone to gain muscle, and clearly he stopped taking testosterone in the 2 years since he murdered Ashley, because when we see him at trial, he looks like a completely different person. And initially I thought maybe he was starving himself to look more pitiful, but it was just that he stopped taking tea. Now also, did you hear how Jamie described Jordan grabbing at Ashley's neck? We have another person corroborating that Jordan was being physical with Ashley out in the open. Now, I'm going to play a few different parts of Jordan's testimony, but while it's fresh in your mind, having just heard Jamie recount Jordan grabbing Ashley's neck, listen to how Jordan describes that same interaction.
Everyone starts to get in their car, and I walk over to Ashley, and we're waving and we're saying our goodbyes, and I put my hand up on her neck and her shoulder again, and she just shrugged me off. She's like, "Stop touching me." Okay, and that's where you hear her start to go into the house on the video, and that's the events that followed. We go into the house.
So next we see the defense trying to get the judge to recuse himself. They would give several reasons, but one was that they felt that the judge should have interceded during Jamie's testimony because she was a hostile witness and he didn't intervene. And then the judge, for his part, he points out that the defense didn't object while she was on the stand, and that was their job to do. The judge was just there as, to bear witness. He's not necessarily there to do that, and they should have objected then. But they give a list of other accusations saying he's milling around with the jury and all this other crap, right? But all dismissed and the trial continues. And we see several distraction tactics like this from the defense, just games being played. They actually come in and move for a mistrial. And Robert Eggert claims that somebody made a comment on social media that he was a racist, which seems like a fair assessment, but that's not the point. He would move for a mistrial based on some person on the internet hurting his feelings, and he felt that would affect the trial in some way. And so the judge is like, was the person was the person who said this somebody from the jury? No. Was it somebody on the prosecution's team? No. Then take a seat. That's what the judge literally said. Eggert wouldn't stop arguing about how it would affect the trial. And the judge was like, I'm sorry you got your feelings hurt. But people talk about judges and lawyers online all of the time. If we dismissed every case because somebody said something bad about a judge or lawyer, it would always be a mistrial and there would literally never be a trial. Take a seat. So the defense calls in a psychologist, and he's paid for his testimony and his time, by the way. And he says that Jordan killed Ashley due to his extreme emotional disturbance. He says allegedly triggered by her behavior at the party, grabbing him by the testicles and her past alleged abuse. But his entire assessment hinges on accepting that Jordan's versions of events are true. Like, it has to be that Jordan's telling the truth for his assessment to make sense. And like, the least reliable source on what a woman is like is the man who murdered her, right? On the man who's abusing her. Why they're going to take his opinion and base their psychological findings on it, I don't know. But this psychologist is basing his conclusion on lies. Meanwhile, the prosecution brings in their own expert, who I assume is paid as well, and he asserts that Jordan exhibited no signs of extreme emotional disturbance. And in the end, I guess these two witnesses really just canceled each other out. Now, this is where we see the video of Ashley's murder being shown to the jury. I covered that in part 1. I'm going to reiterate, though, that Ashley was desperately trying to defuse the situation. Not going to play the audio from the murder. I feel like it's unnecessary. If you want to hear it, you can find it online, but it's just painful and horrible. And Ashley's voice and the gunshots, it's very unbearable. And out of respect for her loved ones who may be listening, I'm not going to play it. So we see Ashley pleading with Jordan to put the gun down. She's seated in a chair and she says, Jordan, be a man. Put the gun down. Let's talk about this. And Jordan's he's just berating her throughout. At one point, he actually gives a countdown and says, tonight's the night you're going to die and it's your own fault. And we see then Ashley try to get up and run. And that's when Jordan opens fire. And I covered the details of the murder also in part 1, but we see him shoot Ashley multiple times, reload, execute her, spit on her, say negative things, and flee. And later at the end of part 1, I played that footage or the audio of his interaction with the officer who pulled him over. And while Jordan's defense argues that he killed Ashley in a moment of blind rage, that he snapped until the police stopped him, like he showed no tears, no emotion, and no signs of an uncontrollable break. What we also learned from neighbors during the trial is that in the hour or two leading up to the shooting, they engaged with Jordan over and over again, trying to help Ashley get him out of the house, trying to defuse. He had ample opportunity to calm down, to leave, to walk away. The idea that he just snapped does not hold up, because the reality is that this was ongoing over a longer period of time, and it was a calculated, cold-blooded act. I think, the most disturbing video I've ever seen. And a few days into the trial, we actually see a witness for Jordan Henning, and it's his superior, one man in particular. It's the high-ranking sergeant who Jordan chauffeurs. And he's there to testify on Jordan's behalf, and it's supposed to be him validating the defense's portrayal of Ashley as the abuser. And I'm going to play a portion of that testimony for you, and I want you to pay special attention to what Jordan's lawyer instructs the witness. He's questioning him about Ashley's demeanor and how she's talking to Jordan on the phone. But before the witness responds to Eggert, he quickly interjects, don't say what Ashley said. Like, he's very adamant. He doesn't want the jury to hear why Ashley was mad and why she may be being unkind to Jordan. He just wants them to remember that Ashley was mad and aggressive. But yeah, context matters. So Ashley had a very good reason to be upset. So the witness tells the court what he heard Ashley say. I'm going to destroy all your stuff, including your motorcycle. And here's that audio.
was concerned about the state of his marriage. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And while he was talking to you, did he receive a phone call?
He did.
And who was it from?
It was from Ashley, his wife.
And did he put the phone on speaker?
He did.
Okay. Don't say what she said. But you heard the conversation.
I did.
Now, the things you heard, were they disturbing to you about what you heard from her?
They were disturbing, yes, sir. She was irate. Well, I remember it was early in the morning. I got the phone call and I got woken up, and I was shocked. It was unbelievable. It's been I guess getting close to 2 years now, and it's still hard for me to it's obvious something happened, and that's why we're all here. It's just hard for me to wrap my head around it as a leader.
If Sergeant Henning had intimated to you that he was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Sergeant First Class Ashley Henning, you would have taken steps to intervene. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell the court what you heard Ashley say to Jordan.
I'm going to destroy all your stuff, to include your motorcycle. I do remember those words. It was a lot of arguing back and forth. Her saying, you're cheating on me. Him saying, no, I'm not. I'm seeing her in a professional manner.
Did you think back to the phone call any at all when you found out about this incident?
I've thought about that phone call many times.
Again, I keep telling you, I want you to remember a few things until the aftermath of the trial. When I get to that, remember this. This superior is supposed to be witness claiming that Ashley called Jordan and threatened to damage his belongings and motorcycles because she believed he was cheating. It's not because she was an abuser. It's because she discovered his infidelity. And wrong or not, when somebody breaks the vows of marriage, someone whose child you're raising as your own, sharing your life with, and they betray you, it's not shocking that the fallout might include threats to ruining your possessions, right? And in total, we see 4 witnesses who know Jordan from Fort Knox testify to his reputation for honesty and nonviolence, which when we wrap this episode up, you will laugh at the irony of people testifying to Jordan being honest. And back at the trial, we see 2 neighbors take the stand who interacted with Jordan the night of the murder. They were at the birthday gathering, and then they interacted. They were the ones trying to get Jordan away from Ashley. It's a man named Jimmy Watts and a Jason Bacher. They were well acquainted with Jordan. They were like drinking buddies. They'd hung out with him in the past and been around him and Ashley a decent amount of time. So as Jordan's anger escalated on this night, Ashley actually yelled for her youngest son. I'm calling him Connor. I don't use the names of minors on the show, but Connor ran to a neighbor to ask for help. And first he got Jimmy, and Jimmy came over to help, but he ended up now caught in Jordan's aggression. And so Connor kept going, and he got the neighbor, Jason. Jason rushed outside toward the Henning household, and he noticed a lot of neighbors like congregating outside. Something was going down inside. It was clear. And as Jason reached the fence, Jimmy appeared from the backyard, urging him to call 911. He said things were spiraling out of control. Nobody had their phone with them. They had all come outside hastily, so they didn't have their phones. Another neighbor, Robert Jennings, was a retired military policeman, and he warned them that he'd been observing Jordan. He suspected Jordan might have a gun. His hands were suspiciously hidden behind his back, and he kind of recognized the demeanor of someone hiding a gun. Now, despite Jimmy having come out and asked people to call 911, no one had actually done that. And so finally, Jimmy's wife dials 911. She hands the phone to other neighbor Jason, and he reports the domestic disturbance. Now, Jason described Jordan as angry and intoxicated. He said earlier in the night he'd been a happy drunk, and he said when he was that way, he was quite touchy and he lacked personal space. But then it shifted to angry drunk, unpredictable, and volatile. So this was patterns that Jordan had of being overly touchy-feely when he was drinking, and a happy drunk and lacking personal space, and then it would shift to angry drunk, unpredictable, volatile. And I want to pause here to emphasize how the testimony of these two neighbors, Jimmy and Jason, directly refute the defense's strategy. The defense argues that Jordan snapped and killed Ashley in a sudden heat of the moment act, but that claim doesn't hold up. If Jordan had truly lost control, why did multiple witnesses describe him as deliberate, clearly instructing people to stay out of his life and stay out of his business and to leave? His behavior was calculated, not impulsive, making the snap defense entirely inconsistent. Another interesting thing that both these two witnesses, the neighbors, would reflect on is Jordan's so-called hit list, a hypothetical top 10 of people he claimed he wanted to kill. And it wasn't just idle talk. Multiple people had heard him mention this list, and shockingly, more than one person recalled Jordan saying his own mother was on it. That in itself is deeply ironic because when the trial came, she was there, crying, testifying, and speaking about what a wonderful human her son was. And it makes you wonder, maybe the idea that narcissists are a product of their mothers isn't so far-fetched after all. Jordan's sister would also give a tearful apology at some point to Ashley's family, but behind the scenes, she was trying to get people to find pictures of Jordan with any markings on his body so she could help the defense paint a false narrative of Ashley physically abusing Jordan. Now we see Jordan's biological daughter go on the stand, and I'm going to call her Brooke. I guess she was 12 at the time of Ashley's murder, so around there. She would testify against Jordan and say that what Jordan did destroyed them and that she misses Ashley terribly. She said that Jordan was the aggressor and that he often handed down harsh, uncalled for punishments when they irritated him. She said there was a lot of physical forms of punishment. And now remember, Brooke is Jordan's biological daughter, not Ashley, though I'm sure Ashley was her protective, favored parent and probably default parent who did everything for her. But she is saying Ashley was the victim in that home. And actually, shortly before the trial started, Brooke would tell the prosecution's office about some particularly terrible physical abuse that Jordan had inflicted upon her and the other kids. It was actually deemed inadmissible because it was new evidence just before she would take the stand, so it wasn't allowed to be presented. Now, you might wonder why she didn't say it sooner. She's a little girl. I've testified against my abuser in the past. It's incredibly stressful and scary, and I can imagine it took a lot of bravery for her to find the courage to share this, so she's amazing. She probably really struggled because even though Jordan's a monster, he's still her dad. And so that's probably why it took a little longer for her to be completely forthright about everything Jordan was doing in that home. But she was so courageous. And yet, unfortunately, part of that testimony was inadmissible. But I tell all of you because it only further bolsters the proof that the only abuser in the Henning household was Jordan. And her having to testify is heart-wrenching to me. Now, every day of the trial, Ashley's cousin John and her best friend Holly were told they were going to get called as witnesses to the abuse. They were going to be called by the prosecution. And every day, Eric Carr didn't call them. But why? This would help the jury understand that Jordan's narrative was lies, but Eric never called them. He never did anything to refute the false allegations or to dispel the narrative that Jordan was a combat veteran. And I really think that he just thought the video of Jordan killing Ashley was enough, that it was it. So now I'm going to play the verdict for you next. So here's that.
Ladies and gentlemen, foreperson of the grand jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, sir. All right. If you'll hand that verdict to my bailiff. And before I read the verdict, is this verdict unanimous for all 12 jurors? All right. I'll ask the defendant and his counsel to please rise. I want to caution everyone again, there will be no outburst. It's inappropriate for any parties, counsel, anyone else in the courtroom to react in any way to the verdict. So I'm looking back on page 11. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree manslaughter under instruction number 6, signed by the foreperson. Again, let me ask you, foreperson, did I read that correctly, and is that all 12 jurors agree with that verdict? All right. You may please be seated.
damn, like how could a jury get it so wrong? For them to find Jordan guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter, he won. I mean, that's what he wanted. He was essentially acquitted of murder and given what he wanted. And it's so bizarre because I watched everything Court TV did on this and all of the interviews. You know, they'll go to the courtroom if you're not familiar, and then while the court goes to recess, they then pan to like legal analysts and courtroom prosecutors and experts that come on and critique what's happening during that. And they all said the same thing. They didn't believe a word Jordan said, and that the two-pronged defense tactics of saying he was a broken combat warrior and suffering from EED and an abuse victim. But also he just snapped. They all thought it was weak and like a transparent lie. And Ashley's family and loved ones were, of course, devastated with this verdict. It comes with only a 20-year sentence. And with good behavior in the state of Kentucky, Jordan could be out on parole in 16 years. And Ashley's cousin John, also a service member, would have the opportunity to address the court. And he sat up there in his uniform and he condemned them. And it was so powerful.
I've served this country for almost 22 years. 22 years in the Marine Corps. I've deployed 7 times to a combat operation, combat zones. 9 times total deployed. And this is the justice that America gives me. Unthinkable, unspeakable, it's disgusting. Thank you, John. Cowards. Every single one of you.
Any cross-examination?
Every single one of you are cowards.
So let's talk about the jury. 14 people were selected. 14 individuals who showed up every day, listened to the testimony, absorbed the details of the case. But they knew from the start that only 12 would ultimately deliberate, with 2 designated as alternates. Now, among those 14 jurors, only 1 woman was Black. The other 13 were white. So then, just moments before deliberations were set to begin, the judge announced that 2 people would be randomly removed. And the claim was that the names had all been placed in a basket and they would draw out completely by chance 2 people to be dismissed. And I think absolutely no surprise here, one of the 2 dismissed jurors was the Black woman. Now, why does this matter? Well, depending on how familiar you are with the case, you may or may not know that Ashley Henning was a beautiful Black woman and Jordan Henning a white man. And I'd like to think this doesn't matter, but I think most logical people can recognize that there are a lot of racial biases in this country. And when Black people do get called for jury service, they're often removed unfairly. People of color are statistically massively underrepresented in jury pools, and numerous studies have shown that racial biases can influence jury verdicts even when jurors are unaware of their own biases. There actually have been multiple studies that have shown that jurors are likely to be much more lenient with people who are similar to them. So white jurors will be lenient on white defendants. This is a phenomenon called leniency similarity. A juror who is white will be lenient on a white defendant. Add in the fact that we have an alleged combat service member in a state that isn't known to be progressive, not great for Ashley. And I have no doubt that if Jordan were Black and Ashley were white, he'd be facing the death penalty. Or if Ashley had killed Jordan, she would be. So here are some of my overarching questions after the verdict. While I only mentioned 1 testimony, 4 of Jordan's military colleagues took the stand to speak highly of him, describing him as a polished, professional, honest, and nonviolent man. But if this man truly suffers from extreme emotional disturbance that he cannot control, why was Ashley the only one who saw it? I always find it interesting when people claim violent men lose control. Why they don't lose control with their boss, with someone bigger than them, with a weapon, or in public. They're entirely in control of when and where they unleash their aggression. So how convenient that Jordan's supposed emotional disturbance was only present with Ashley and at home. Also, given that there were multiple witnesses sworn in and waiting in the wings, why didn't the prosecution call more of them that could testify to the abuse Jordan subjected his family to? That omission is deeply concerning. And next question, why wasn't the truth about Jordan's military career revealed? He was not a combat soldier, and yet so much of his defense laid on like a deliberate effort to frame him as a man shattered by exposure to combat training and warfare. And yeah, PTSD can absolutely stem from experience outside of direct combat. The specific narrative that they gave was that he was troubled from his combat in wartime. And it would have been so easy to disprove. Why wasn't that distinction made clear? It feels like a missed opportunity to dismantle a critical piece of his defense. We all saw that video of Jordan ruthlessly murdering Ashley. Why would any jury believe a word he said? Ashley was running away from him and he was chasing her. Does that sound like something a victim does? I promise you, I would never have been chasing my abuser in any scenario. I'd be running the opposite direction. This case has gotten to me personally so much. I find myself laying in bed at night thinking of Ashley and all the ways in which she's been failed. Because there are cases that haunt you, just cases where justice doesn't just slip through the cracks, but seemingly gets shoved aside. Cases where a prosecutor misses the mark, where strategy fails, where a jury isn't given the full picture. And then there are cases like this one. Cases so appalling and so tangled and biased that you have to wonder, was justice ever really the goal? A prosecutor who probably could have won but didn't? A jury selection that raises more questions than it answers? A tightly knit good old boy network shielding a man they portrayed as an honorable combat veteran? An illusion that would have crumbled under even the slightest scrutiny? And decisions so questionable, so seemingly deliberate, that you have to ask, was this trial lost on purpose? Now, the public outrage for Ashley has been strong in just the small media coverage I've seen. The comments section is wildly against Jordan and pro-Ashley, and that's without the general public having a full view of what really was going on behind the scenes. And I'm going to tell you now who Jordan Henning really was, and it's going to make you even more mad at the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Because after the verdict was made, I went onto social media and made a video just ranting about how this was the result of systemic racism and how Ashley was a victim. And after being up just a short amount of time, a comment catches my eye. A person saying they know Jordan, he's a piece of shit, and they had proof. So I respond essentially like, show me, come on my podcast. But this anonymous source wants to protect their identity for their safety, a decision I totally understand and support. So I say, okay, send me what you have anonymously. And they do. And I wasn't expecting much, but let me tell you, I was shocked. This was no longer just the story of an angry narcissist. It was the story of a man desperately protecting a double life, one riddled with sexual deviance, deeply taboo kinks, and a mile-long roster stretching back over a decade. And to make it all worse, the evidence was right there in plain sight, yet investigators looked the other way. That fact alone forces you to reevaluate everything you thought you knew about how investigations unfold and just how far the military, law enforcement, and defense attorneys, or rather the bad actors within those fields, will go to shield their own. The email I receive is titled Secret. I open it up and start scrolling, and then suddenly there he is, Jordan Henning, his online profiles. And at first I expected the usual, maybe some Tinder or Match.com nonsense. But what I found was much darker. There were online profiles for fetish websites, one called FetLife and then another called X-Hamster or Zamster. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's X-Hamster spelling. Because apparently one wasn't enough. He needed two to really get his money's worth. But Jordan wasn't just a passive observer on these sites. He was active, posting frequently and consistently since 2014. And what was he sharing was, well, truly shocking. The first photos I come across, those are the ones you may see now on court TV. It shows Jordan's abs and he's standing up with his arms above him. Another one, he's sitting on a couch, seemingly naked with nothing but a hand towel covering his genitals. And his profile name is bass player, which, my dumbass, I initially assumed meant he played an instrument. Maybe he does, and it's like a double entendre, but now I think it's a nod to a sexual position. Now, friends, a moment to remind you about my warning of explicit content from part 1. That's coming in hot now, so be forewarned. So there's Jordan's profile with his face, and I keep scrolling this email, and there's his bio saying that he's bisexual, and then it goes down a list of all the BDSM kinks that he is into. He is very into receiving anal sex, being fisted, choking others and receiving, gangbangs, sex in public, and now this is where it gets very interesting. Do you all remember the portion where I said Jordan cried on the stand and said that Ashley grabbed him by his manhood? His lawyer, Eggert, talked about it over and over again, how Ashley had grabbed his testicles, how it had hurt him. Well, Jordan has a major fetish. His fetish that made my jaw drop. And it's none other than cock and ball torture. I did not know this was a thing, but yep, that's right. What he gets off on is having someone literally bust his balls, meaning punch, bite, grab, pull him by, kick him in them, etc., etc. This really jumped out at me because I think a person like Jordan, who has this fetish and has the nerve to get up on the stand and say that his ego was bruised because his wife clutched his testicles, my honest to God gut feeling is that he's a sociopath and that he enjoyed getting up there and fake crying and saying that it bruised his ego and it hurt his testicles when his wife grabbed them. When in actuality, he has a paid website where he solicited strangers on the internet to come over and beat up his junk. I think he was up there laughing internally about that. And now I should add that this profile was active even like a week ago. He left it up through the entirety of the trial. And some of the material that was sent to me showed Jordan having anal sex with men, like the video of it actually happening. His head, the actual, you can see it all. You can literally see his head, his body, everything. There's no question if that is Jordan. And I want to again loop back to the testimony from Jordan's superior that Ashley was irate when she found out something and knew he was cheating. Can you imagine if she found this website or if someone told her about it? Now, if Jordan ever gets the chance for a jailhouse interview or any kind of platform talks to him and he's asked about his BDSM activities online, he's going to claim that he and Ashley had an open relationship. He's going to claim that Ashley knew exactly what he was into. He's probably going to say they were swingers, but the military has a pretty substantial swinger community. How come nobody else knew about them? None of their friends? I've had friends who are swingers. There's rules in place. It's not just one partner getting online and soliciting gangbangs. And let's be real. Women who are aware their partners are having gangbangs aren't calling them when they're with their work superior irate and threatening to trash their motorcycle in rage when they hear of an infidelity. Now, when I asked Holly if there was any chance Ashley knew about this double life, she was adamant. Absolutely not. Ashley never would have been okay with that. She said Ashley had suspected one or two indiscretions and was devastated by them. And, one of the most agonizing parts of all this, in my opinion, is that Jordan wasn't just deceiving Ashley. He was actively putting her in danger. One of his videos, you can find it if you want. I can't unsee it at this point, but it is titled by Jordan. It's titled Taking BBC. Now, if you don't know what BBC is, I urge you to not look that up from a work device. But let's just say the B and B are big black. And underneath that video is a caption that Jordan wrote, and that caption says, "Me getting raw fucked." That's right. Not only was Jordan having sex outside the marriage without Ashley's knowledge with men and women in groups, apparently, he wasn't even being safe. He was having unprotected sex with multiple people and exposing her to God knows what. And if you aren't shooketh enough by these revelations, the next pictures I see when I'm scrolling this email are Jordan in women's lingerie. That guy was a beefcake when he was on T, so it was quite a sight. But there he is, prancing around in a G-string. He likes to engage in a practice that in the BDSM community is called being a sissy. Now, I am not part of the BDSM community, and listen, if there's two consenting adults and there's no power dynamic between them, think Diddy and the people that he coerced. If there's pressure and coercion and blowback on one party if they refuse to participate, that's not But if there are two people who fully want to participate in BDSM acts and no third parties being put at risk, do whatever makes you happy, okay? But that was not Jordan's situation. And I'm also not going to say no kink shame. I always hear podcasters say, I'm not trying to kink shame anyone. But listen, I'm going to kink shame Jordan. Unfollow me if you must. But some of the shit I saw him do was downright disturbing. There's like a video out there of the guy shoving a sock in his mouth and then duct taping his entire head, which sounds like a terrible way to die if things go south. But anyways, on top of everything else, all of these random BDSM meetups and hookups, and also Jordan was allegedly having a full-fledged affair with a woman. I'm going to call her Kelly. I tried reaching out to her, but she blocked me. The only trace I have of her is a Instagram profile and Pinterest, ironically. But from what I gathered, she seems to believe Jordan, which tells me she's not willing to examine or question the evidence, or she also is a victim of his just lies. But according to my source, Jordan was frequently dating multiple other women, and he was telling them all he was divorced and a single dad, and that he was the victim of domestic violence. The reality was, he and Ashley weren't even separated. Now, the anonymous source has shared with me that the military police were given this information, and also that the prosecution's office was contacted numerous times about this information, and they did not care. The overwhelming response was their sex life isn't of our concern, which is absolutely mind-blowing when you're talking about murder. Have they never seen Dateline? The top motives for murder are almost always the same. Someone gets caught having an affair, or they want to leave their partner for someone else. Someone refuses to split assets in a divorce, so they kill someone so they don't have to. Or someone fears that their dirty secrets are going to be exposed, and so they silence the person who could reveal them. Ashley's family and friends believe that she discovered Jordan's double life and that she was done. She was ready to leave him and maybe even expose him, and his carefully curated image was about to unravel. Some of the audio from the night of her murder even suggests that Jordan was fixated on protecting his reputation, and that's what he was yelling about before he killed her. So why didn't the prosecution do a forensic search of Jordan's phone and computer? I know they at least scanned his phone because they contacted people he had been speaking with regularly during that time frame. They told me that they'd been contacted by the police. If they'd scanned the phone, are we really supposed to believe that a guy who'd been active on these fetish sites for a decade had zero suspect activity on his phone? I also heard they called his mistress in. I haven't been able to confirm that with her. Also, there were location data placing Jordan at the on-base apartments, which is never good. There is also proof that he had taken his daughter, Brooke, on a trip where he met up with his mistress. All of this was there. Anyone who wanted to could have laid it all out in court, but they didn't. Why? Jordan Henning spent years meticulously crafting a public image, one that convinced those around him he was a decorated soldier, a devoted husband and father, and a caring friend and neighbor. But beneath that carefully constructed facade, he was a cheating, manipulative predator with countless affairs, terrorizing his wife and children. When Ashley uncovered the truth and told him she was done, he saw her as a direct threat to the illusion he had spent years maintaining. He couldn't bear the thought of the world seeing him for who he truly was, so deeply insecure in his own identity that he was willing to do anything to protect the lie. Margaret Atwood, renowned author of The Handmaid's Tale, activist, feminist, she once spoke on a radio station in the 1980s about the fundamental differences in how men and women perceive threats from one another, and her insights into gender dynamics were just profound. But she went on to say that what men fear most is that women will laugh at them. What women fear most is that men will kill them. And in the end, both things were true in the Henning household. Jordan's arrogance and insecurity were two sides of the same coin. He carried deeply buried secrets, maintaining a carefully crafted facade, portraying his job as more dangerous and combat adjacent than it truly was, his marriage as happier than reality, and his home life as stable and content. Whether Jordan was ashamed of his sexuality and afraid Ashley would laugh at him or expose him, in the end, his fear over his image being discovered contributed to the death of Ashley. Now, I mentioned in part 1 that Jordan was still trying to manipulate the judicial system and play the victim. So when the sentence happened, Jordan was sentenced and he received 20 years. He was credited 2 years for the time he'd been behind bars since he murdered Ashley. And he stands up and he tearfully addresses the court. He even addresses Ashley herself, calling her Boo Bear. Wanted to vomit, the nerve. But his lawyer would also say that they wanted to pursue an exception that Kentucky law has for domestic violence victims. That law says that if a person is convicted of manslaughter, but they committed manslaughter under the duress of being a domestic violence victim, then they can actually get released at the halfway point of their jail term. So even after they sentenced him to 20 years, his lawyer was like, yeah, we're going to come back and we're going to see if we can get it knocked down. And the judge is like, we'll review that then. So this happened this past week. And this is what the judge had to say.
I've seen the entire video, as I think I staged on the record way too many times. I've been doing this for a little bit. Sometimes when you make these decisions, I don't get nervous because TVs are here, people out there, and you're used to that when you do this kind of job. I think you get nervous in this job when you want to make the right decision. You get nervous when it's either or real close. I think I got nervous yesterday at Colorado, and I think I'm still nervous. I'm not so sure I should have completely revoked that young man's probation yesterday, but we'll see on that. How about that? I think I'm still nervous about that. I'm nervous about that. I'm not nervous about this. I'm not more nervous about this one because, it's clear to me. Mr. Henning is not a victim of domestic violence.
Beautiful. Thank God somebody is seeing through the bullshit and lies of Jordan Henning. So he only has to serve the manslaughter term, but it's not getting cut in half and they don't see him. There's no record out there saying he was a domestic violence victim. There's actually the opposite. A judge on record saying, you were not. Jordan was all set to schlep back to prison without ever having to face the reality of his double life being exposed. Perhaps only a handful of us behind the scenes, along with his sexual partners, would have truly known the depths of his deception. But thanks to the courage of an anonymous person who reached out to me and the relentless determination of Ashley's loved ones, the truth came out at Jordan's sentencing. The day before the sentencing, John called me to discuss some of the information I'd shared with them. I also connected the family with my anonymous source, and they communicated directly. And the next morning, John walks into that courtroom and he delivers the following impact statement. If you can watch it in person, I highly recommend it because Jordan's face is just priceless as he's being exposed. And with that, I'm going to leave you with the powerful words of John Williams as he discusses the impact of losing Ashley as he exposes the monster Jordan Henning. And Ashley, we thank you for your service. We honor you. We will never let you be forgotten. Rest in peace.
Ashley deserved compassion, mercy, all those things that you talked about right now. But she's not here to do that, is she? You stand here convicted today of manslaughter. You make no mistake. You murdered Ashley. You killed my sister. She was a daughter, a mother of three, a friend, and one of the most respected people in the community, and the young. Now you get to serve a 20-year sentence, hopefully in a controlled facility protected by locked gates and routine. While Ashley's children must now grow up without their mother. They will never feel the warmth of Ashley's signature hug. They'll never hear her booming laugh or her soothing voice. Or heed the guidance she would have provided as they navigated life's milestones. You robbed them of their innocence and safety. In the one place that they should have felt the safest. No matter how much love and support we provide, not they both will replace the presence of another. We carry the weight of losing someone so important to so many people. You should consider yourself lucky. Because prison is the safest place on earth for you right now. Because I can't get my hands on it. It was utterly disgusting during the trial while you hid behind the fact that you were a soldier. Let me be clear. You don't get to use the uniform to justify what you did. You wore it, but you disgraced it. I reviewed your service record book. You never deployed, you never saw combat. You were a chauffeur. And yet you invoked your service and the training you received as some sort of excuse for murdering Ashley. No excuse. It's pathetic and it's insulting. Ashley was the real deal. She was a decorated soldier. She served her country in Iraq and Afghanistan with honor and courage. You don't get to stand in her shadow and pretend you wore the same uniform the same way she did. You were a disgrace to every man and woman who's ever served the country in uniform with integrity, and you dishonored their sacrifice every time you opened your mouth and pretend otherwise. You weren't convicted of what you really did. You manipulated the narrative. You continue to manipulate the narrative now. You sold the jury a lie and somehow got away with a lesser charge. But those lies don't protect you here today. Someone close to you finally had enough of your lies and your deceit. They came forward and revealed what you've been hiding. Your double life. The life you live is base plan. While you were recorded accusing Ashley of being unstable for years, dating back as far as 2014 when you were stationed in Colorado, you were living underneath that personality on Fet Life and Exham Street. Those accounts are still active. You've been keeping your BDSM, cross-dressing, having sex with other men, alternative lifestyle in secret and in the shadows. And now it comes into the light. I'm not here to shame you for your choices in the bedroom. It's yours to own. What I'm here to say is this. When you sat in the courtroom and tried to paint Ashley as unstable, unfaithful, and deviant, you were just projecting. There's plenty of photographic evidence and video evidence to substantiate my claim. Like I said, those accounts are still active. You made Ashley the villain, discovering who you really are. She found out, and that terrified her. You told her, you're going to ruin my image. We all heard it on camera. When Ashley finally said she had enough, and you made sure she wouldn't say another word to another soul. So now I'm saying it for her. You were and are living a lie. You killed the one person who could expose it, and now even with this light sentence, I promise you the truth is out. No more masks, no more lies. The person you pretend to be is no more. Now you must deal with the real Jordan. And the real you will live every day for the next 18 years, hopefully, knowing exactly who put the mirror to your face. It was her family, it was her friends, the ones who loved her most. Holly, Jamie, Brandon, Chris, Natasha, and I. We're the people who will never let you forget what you did, who you are, and how you tried to bury both. My grandmother, God rest her soul, used to always say what's done in the dark always comes to the light. So welcome to the light, and good luck on the inside, bass player. Spelled B-A-S-E-P-L-A-Y-A-R. Now that the truth is out, I'm sure your fellow inmates will appreciate the full picture. I hear they're very understanding when it comes to liars, manipulators, and men who kill women with children in them in order to protect their image. You might want to keep your username yourself or not. Either way, your real sentence is just beginning.